I remember the first time I saw him. It was late September, that kind of golden hour where the sunlight kisses the edges of everything, like the world is trying to hold on to warmth just a little longer before fall takes over. I was sitting at Cafe Easton, nursing a lukewarm chai latte and scrolling through emails I didn't care about, when I looked up and saw him walking in. Tall, slightly awkward in the way that made you want to know his story. He had this nervous energy, like the world surprised him a little more than it should. His name was Eli Grant. And he changed my life. He ordered black coffee. No cream, no sugar, just like that. We made eye contact for a second, maybe two. He smiled. I didn't. I didn't know how to anymore. At that point, I was living on autopilot. I had just moved back to Chicago after a long, exhausting breakup with a man who had loved the idea of me more than he ever bothered to understand the real thing. I was 29. I had a corporate job I was good at and friends who said I was too picky when it came to dating, as if asking for someone to show up and mean it was asking for too much. But Eli, he noticed things. We officially met a week later. He was sitting alone at the same cafe, sketching in a leather-bound notebook. I was rushing, late as usual, and dropped my purse while trying to answer a call. Lip balm, receipts, gum, everything scattered. He crouched to help, his fingers brushing mine as he handed me my pen. His eyes were the kind you don't forget, green, but not in a showy way. Gentle. Observant. You dropped this, he said. I drop everything, I replied. He laughed, quiet and surprised. Well, then, nice to meet you, everything. I smiled for the first time in weeks. Our love didn't explode like fireworks. It grew like roots, slow, steady, and undeniable. We started having these long conversations, at cafes, on late walks through the city, sitting on the floor of my apartment sharing takeout and confessions. He was an illustrator. Children's books mostly. Said he liked drawing things that made kids feel safe in a world that didn't always give them that. His mom had died when he was 10. I think part of him never stopped looking for safety too. I told him things I hadn't said out loud before. About my fear of being ordinary. About the ache that comes from people who love you halfway. About how I felt like I was always waiting for my real life to start. And Eli, he listened like it mattered. Like I mattered. One night, we lay on the hood of his car just outside the city. We'd driven out to see the stars, his idea. There weren't many, but he pointed at the few we could see like they were miracles. You ever think, he asked, that the people who see us the clearest aren't looking at us with their eyes? I turned to look at him. What do they use, then? He didn't look at me. He just whispered, their heart. I think I fell in love with him right then, in the quiet, in the dark, in that aching stillness where it felt like the universe held its breath just for us. Time started folding in on itself. Days became memories before I could hold on to them. We spent Sundays at the farmer's market, laughing over fresh peaches and trying too many cheese samples. We danced in my kitchen to songs we both pretended to know. I watched him talk to strangers like they'd known him forever, this strange, beautiful gift of making people feel seen. But more than anything, I remember the way he looked at me. Not like I was broken. Not like I was some project to fix. But like I was a story worth reading all the way through, even the parts written in invisible ink. One afternoon, I caught him sketching in that leather notebook again. I peeked over his shoulder, and there I was, drawn in pencil, sitting cross-legged on the couch with a coffee mug in my hand and a soft, distracted smile on my face. You drew me? I asked. He nodded. It's how I remember you when you're not here. There's something about being loved like that. Not for your potential. Not for what you give. But just for being. If I had known then what I know now, maybe I would have held him longer that night we sat on the rooftop, watching the lights of the city flicker like fireflies. Maybe I would have said, I love you sooner. Or louder. Or twice. But love doesn't ask for timing. It just is. Wild. Unpredictable. Deep. That was the season I fell for Eli Grant, when the air turned crisp and my heart, for the first time in years, felt like it had come home. And I never imagined the day would come when I'd start to disappear from him. But that's another story. One I wish I didn't have to tell. You don't always notice when something begins to fade. Sometimes it's just a missed text, a skipped dinner, a quiet sigh you don't ask about. At first it's nothing, you tell yourself that. But then, it's not. It started with the mornings. I've always been a morning person, the kind who hums while making coffee, who opens all the curtains for sunlight before she even brushes her teeth. Eli would tease me about it, call me his little sunbeam. But then one Tuesday in November, I didn't get out of bed. Not because I was tired. I just couldn't. I remember him sitting on the edge of the mattress, one hand resting lightly on my hip, the other brushing my hair back. "You okay?" he asked softly. I smiled. Lied. Just a rough night. But it wasn't just that night. The days blurred. I started forgetting things, simple things. I'd pour water into the coffee machine, but forget to turn it on. I'd stand in the shower, unmoving, long after the water turned cold. I laughed less. I loved him just as deeply, but the warmth that used to live inside me, it was flickering, like a flame trapped in glass running out of oxygen. Something inside was dimming. He noticed. God, he noticed. I saw it in his eyes, the way his gaze would linger on me just a second too long, like he was trying to memorize something before it was gone. I caught him watching me as I stood in the kitchen, not moving, not blinking. His brows pulled together, quiet worry replacing his usual calm. "You've been distant lately," he finally said one night as we lay in bed. "Not just tired. Not just work. Something's off. Talk to me, Lex." Lex. Short for Alexandra. Only he ever called me that. I wanted to tell him. I wanted to say, "I'm scared. I don't know what's happening to me. I feel like I'm slipping through the cracks of my own life and I can't stop it." But the words got stuck somewhere between my heart and my throat. All I managed was, "I'm just overwhelmed." He kissed my forehead. "We'll slow down." But no matter how slow life got, I kept falling behind. It was around Christmas when things got worse. We were walking down Clark Street, the air sharp and full of lights, people laughing, music drifting from little shops. I remember holding his gloved hand, squeezing it. And then, nothing. I woke up sitting on a bench, my coat open, Eli kneeling in front of me. "Lex, hey, look at me. You fainted. Are you okay? You're freezing." "Jesus, I told you to wear the thicker jacket." I looked at him and whispered, "I don't remember falling." His hands were shaking. The doctors were vague. Blood work. MRIs. Scans. Questions. More questions. Some days they hinted at stress, others hinted at neurological disorders. One specialist said it could be early onset something. Another said maybe it was psychological, trauma, depression, dissociation. But I knew what it felt like. Like pieces of me were being taken in small handfuls. Some days I was just tired. Other days I was gone. I'd stare at my reflection and not recognize the woman blinking back. I forgot birthdays. I forgot my favorite songs. I forgot the sound of my own laugh. And still, I tried to protect him from it. I kept smiling. I kept pretending. I kept reaching for the light I used to shine so easily. But one night, I broke. It was snowing outside, softly, the kind of snowfall that makes everything feel slower, quieter. Eli had made dinner. Lasagna. He set the table, lit a candle. Played Billie Holiday on vinyl. I sat across from him, fork in hand. And suddenly, I couldn't remember how to eat. I stared at the food like it was foreign. My mind blank. Silent. "Lex," he asked, his voice low. I don't know what to do," I whispered. He got up, walked around the table, and knelt beside me. I didn't look at him. I was embarrassed. Ashamed. Terrified. His hand reached for mine, trembling slightly. "It's okay," he said, voice cracking. "Whatever this is, we'll face it. Together." But I could see it, the fear behind his eyes. And in that moment, I realized the thing I feared most wasn't losing myself. It was making him watch it happen. The glow that used to live behind my eyes, the one he fell in love with, it was fading. And I could feel it. Like standing at the edge of a shoreline, knowing the tide is coming, and no matter how tightly you grip the sand, you're still going to be pulled under. I didn't want to drown. But I didn't know how to swim anymore either. Eli stopped drawing. That was the first thing I noticed. His sketchbook stayed closed, left on the windowsill where the sun used to catch its edges. It sat there like a memory, unopened. A part of him paused. He didn't say anything about it. He didn't have to. I saw it in the way he carried himself. He still made me tea in the mornings. Still kissed the top of my head. Still wrapped me in blankets when I forgot how to stay warm. But something in him had retreated, not away from me but inward. Like he was walking through his own storm, one that had no words. It's strange, watching the strongest person you know unravel, slowly, silently. He never raised his voice. Never blamed me. But every time I caught him staring, really staring, it was like watching someone try to hold back a dam with their bare hands. One evening, I found him in the laundry room, gripping the edge of the washer like it was the only thing holding him up. His head hung low, shoulders heaving quietly. He didn't know I was there. I watched him break, silently. Then I backed away. Because something about the way he cried, it wasn't meant for me. It was for everything he couldn't fix. Days passed like gray clouds, heavy, slow, quiet. He started talking less. I started forgetting more. He wrote things down for me, notes on the fridge, reminders in my phone. At first, they were simple. "Take your meds at 9. Don't forget your gloves, cold today. I love you." But over time, they got longer. "If you wake up confused, you're safe. I'm Eli. You love me. Today is Thursday. You don't have to do anything except breathe. I've got the rest." I would read those notes again and again, sometimes out loud, just to anchor myself to something. I began to live in fragments. And Eli, he was fading right beside me. I think what broke him most was the helplessness. He went to every appointment. Asked every question. Argued with doctors. Read medical journals, made spreadsheets, took notes on symptoms. He recorded my episodes. Logged the time. Looked for patterns. But the one thing he couldn't do was reach me, not fully. Not the way he used to. One night, I had what I guess you'd call an episode. I don't remember it. But he told me I locked myself in the bathroom. Wouldn't come out. Said things that didn't make sense. Asked him who he was. Cried like I was being hunted. He sat outside the door for 2 hours. Didn't knock. Didn't yell. Just sat there. He told me later that he talked to me through the crack in the door. Told me stories about the night we met. The first time we kissed. The time I spilled curry all over our new rug and blamed it on a ghost. When I finally opened the door, he said I looked at him like he was a stranger, and then I started crying. "I just want to remember you," I had whispered. He held me. 4 hours. And didn't say a word. He stopped sleeping. He was thinner. Paler. I could see it, he was burning the candle at both ends, and somewhere deep down, he was starting to give up on saving himself. But he never stopped loving me. Even when I forgot what day it was. Even when I forgot what he was to me. Even when I screamed in my sleep and woke up sobbing into his shirt, terrified of my own mind. He stayed. He held my hand like it still meant something, even when I didn't always hold it back. He played our favorite songs, even when I couldn't remember the words. He told me jokes with tired eyes and begged me to laugh, just once, just for him. And when the laughter didn't come, he smiled anyway. The silence between us grew heavier. But it was never empty. It was filled with everything he was holding in, the fear, the ache, the longing, the memories he was carrying for both of us. There's a kind of love that doesn't scream or demand. A kind that doesn't need to be seen to be known. That's who Eli became in those months. A quiet warrior. A man who stood between me and the dark, even when it started swallowing him too. I remember waking up one morning, my head foggy, my heart too quiet. I rolled over and saw him, sitting on the floor, back against the wall, eyes wide open. I whispered, "Did you sleep?" He shook his head. "Didn't want to miss you, if you came back." That's when I knew. He was holding on to me. Even when I wasn't there. Love doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the sound of someone breathing beside you, long after you've forgotten who they are. Sometimes it's silence, filled with pain, filled with devotion, filled with everything words can't carry. Eli never left. But I could feel him losing himself, one quiet heartbreak at a time. And I knew something had to give. Because if I didn't find a way to come back to him, he wouldn't survive the weight of waiting. It happened on a Wednesday. The kind of day no one remembers, gray sky, stale air, a faint drizzle that never becomes real rain. Eli had gone to work late, only after I promised I felt normal again. That was the word I used. Normal. Like it meant something. But by noon, I couldn't remember what normal was. I stood in the hallway, fingers grazing the light switch, unable to remember how it worked. My brain, it just froze. I could feel it, like a door slamming shut from the inside. I sat down on the floor, heart racing, tears welling. I don't know how long I sat there. But when Eli got home, I was still there. The lights were off. So was I. He didn't speak. He just knelt in front of me, held my face in his hands, and whispered, "I know this isn't you." And something in his voice, not fear this time, but fire, made me believe it. That night, something snapped in him. He stayed up again, pacing the kitchen floor in socks, scrolling endlessly through research papers, message boards, online support groups. I watched from the hallway as he muttered things to himself under his breath: late-onset trauma, misdiagnosis, neurotoxins, memory loss patterns, environmental triggers. At 3 a.m., he slammed his laptop shut and stared at nothing. "What if it's not in your head, Lex?" he said aloud, like he was telling the dark. And that's when it started, the investigation. Eli became obsessed. He printed my medical records. Requested copies from every hospital, every scan. He called doctors who never returned his calls. He built timelines on the wall with sticky notes, photos, receipts, voice memos. He reviewed every moment, when the memory loss started, what I'd eaten, where we'd been, what medications I was on. He became a detective with a broken heart. And somewhere between desperation and love, he found something. It was hidden in the most ordinary thing, a prescription refill. I had been taking a common anxiety medication for years. Nothing serious, nothing experimental. But Eli noticed something: my symptoms had worsened not long after switching pharmacies. A generic refill. Same drug. Different manufacturer. He dug deeper. Found an obscure thread buried in a caregiver forum: severe memory side effects linked to specific batches of generic benzodiazepines. A lawsuit in another state. Quietly settled. Contaminants. Manufacturing errors. Memory impairment. Personality changes. Fading cognition. He froze. That night, he stood in the living room holding the pill bottle in one hand and a printout in the other. "This is it," he whispered, breathless. "This has to be it." The rage that filled him then. I'd never seen it before. Not from Eli. He wasn't just angry. He was betrayed. By doctors who never listened. By a system that overlooked me. By himself for not finding it sooner. He made calls. Sent emails. Filed reports. But no one answered. They don't when it's already done. When what's been taken can't be returned. He weaned me off the medication, carefully, under a new doctor's care. A specialist this time. Someone who actually looked at him when he spoke. Who asked me questions and waited for real answers. Someone who saw the timeline and went very, very still. Eli asked, "Will she come back?" The doctor hesitated. "Some of her, maybe. Hope is a cruel kind of kindness." Over the next few weeks, I started having flashes. Moments where things came back. A laugh. A smell. A dream that felt real. Once I remembered the name of Eli's favorite cereal and nearly cried over it in the grocery store. I remembered something, I whispered when we got home. He didn't say anything. Just kissed me. And cried. But the thing is, even when memory returned, something had shifted. There were still gaps. Still days I lost. Still fears that clung to the edges of my thoughts like shadows. And Eli? He wasn't the man who first held my hand in that coffee shop. He was harder now. Not colder, never that. But quieter. Less playful. Like love had carved something out of him and filled it with purpose instead of peace. He tracked everything, my sleep, my words, my eyes. He kissed me gently, like I was something fragile he didn't know how to carry anymore. He held my face like it might vanish if he let go. And the fire in him, the one that led him to the truth, it didn't go out. He wanted answers. He wanted justice. Even if it meant chasing ghosts through courtrooms and red tape. Even if it meant suing pharmaceutical companies that would never admit what they'd done. Even if it meant risking what was left of us. I told him once, maybe we just move on. And he looked at me, hurt, confused. "I almost lost you," he said. "I'm not letting them forget that." So he kept fighting. For me. For the version of me that almost disappeared. For the truth buried beneath symptoms and silence. The more he uncovered, the more I realized something terrifying. They hadn't just taken memories. They'd stolen time. Laughter. Mornings in bed. Inside jokes. Whole chapters of who we were. And Eli, the man who once painted joy into every corner of our life, was now the man who spent his nights buried in paperwork and court documents. And I began to wonder. What else would love take from him before this was over? There's something no one tells you about love, the kind that goes to war for you. They don't tell you it changes people. That it carves into their soul, makes them bleed where no one can see, hardens the soft places not out of choice but necessity. Love doesn't just lift. It reshapes. And Eli became someone else. It started with the voice. Not his voice, how he used it. Gone was the gentle lilt, the slow pauses, the laughter behind each word. Now he spoke like a man who expected to be ignored, and refused to be. To doctors. To lawyers. To reporters. To me sometimes, when I began to second-guess the path he was taking. He spoke like a man who had buried too much hope to waste time on politeness. The lawsuit became his mission. He spent his savings. Took leave from work. Hired a private investigator when the pharmaceutical company denied any wrongdoing. His days blurred into affidavits, phone calls, press emails, medical testimonies. He started saying things like, "They won't silence me," and "they don't get to walk away." I asked him once, "What if we lose?" He looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. "Then I lose loudly." He got leaner. Stronger, even. Started running in the mornings, said it helped him think. He stopped drinking coffee, switched to tea, cut sugar, slept less. The kindness was still there, in his eyes, in his touch. But the lightness was gone. He wasn't the man who used to dance barefoot in our kitchen. He was the man building a case like a soldier sharpening a sword. One night, I found him asleep at the kitchen table, his head resting on a stack of court documents. The lamp beside him flickered. His hand was still holding a pen. I wanted to wake him. But I just stood there, watching the man who had loved me through forgetting, and wondered what it had cost him to carry all that pain alone. This was not the life he had dreamed of. He once told me he wanted to illustrate full-time. Write a children's book about grief. Start a small studio. Teach art to kids who didn't know how to say what they felt. Now he was drowning in legal jargon and lab reports. And the worst part? He never complained. Because to him, I was still worth every inch of the battle. My recovery wasn't linear. Some memories never came back. But enough did. Enough to remember the softness we once had. The easy laughter. The quiet Sundays. The nights under city stars when the only thing between us was air and promises. I missed him. The man who looked at me like I was made of sunlight, not glass. The man who drew joy with pencil and paper, not pain with legal ink. And he was still there. Underneath the armor. One morning, after months of silence and strategy, I found him sketching again. Not in a notebook. On the fogged-up bathroom mirror. A heart. Our initials. Nothing fancy. Just a message I used to leave for him, back when everything was simple. I stood behind him, wrapped my arms around his waist, and whispered, "You're still in there." His voice cracked. I don't know how to be him anymore. That night, we didn't talk about the lawsuit. We didn't talk about medication or symptoms or memory gaps. We danced. In the living room. Barefoot. No music. Just us. Two broken people pretending, for a moment, that we were whole. Later, as we lay on the floor, his fingers tracing mine, he whispered, "I was supposed to protect you." "You did," I said. "Not soon enough." I looked at him, this man who had aged 10 years in one, who had burned his dreams to light the path back to me. "You gave up everything." He looked at me, eyes full of quiet pain. "No," he said. "I gave it for something. The truth is, love changes us. Sometimes it saves. Sometimes it scars. And sometimes it demands more than we knew we had." Eli never stopped loving me. But he had become someone forged in fire, someone I didn't always recognize, but somehow loved more fiercely than ever. Because the man he became was a man who never let go. Not of me. Not of justice. Not of us. But I knew something he didn't. Something I hadn't told him yet. Something that would shatter the new life he was clinging to. Because even though I was slowly coming back, something else was still being taken. And I didn't know how long I had left to hold him. There's a silence that comes at the end of a war, not peace, not relief. Just quiet. That's what filled our apartment now. After the lawsuit settled. After the reporters stopped calling. After the pharmaceutical company offered their pale apology, and their money, and their denial. After Eli stood in front of a courtroom and told strangers about the woman I used to be. That's when the silence came. And in that silence, we both knew the truth. I wasn't getting better. Not really. Not fully. The episodes had become rarer, yes. But when they came like waves, slow at first, then violently, without warning. I'd forget where I was. Forget him. Forget myself. Sometimes I came back quickly. Sometimes I didn't. And Eli, God, Eli, kept standing there, waiting for me to return like some ancient lighthouse waiting on a ship that might never come home. I asked him once, "Why do you still look at me like that?" He just smiled, the corners of his mouth trembling. "Because I still see you." But love isn't always enough to hold a body together. And my body had started giving signs. Fainting spells. Weakness. Slurred speech. Numb fingers. More scans. More appointments. More bad news said in soft voices. There was damage. Irreversible. Neurodegenerative, they said. Likely triggered by prolonged toxicity. Maybe genetic susceptibility. Maybe bad luck. No cure. No guarantee. Just time. Less of it than we'd hoped. I told Eli the night I got the final diagnosis. He didn't cry. He just sat on the floor, legs pulled to his chest, staring at the wall like it had answers he didn't. After a long pause, he said, "So what do we do now?" I looked at him, this man who had lost everything but never stopped loving me, and whispered, "We live. Until we can't." So that's what we did. We lived. Not loudly. Not for Instagram or dinner parties. We lived in moments. Tiny, bright, fragile moments. We drove to the coast just once. Slept in the back of his car. Ate sandwiches on a cliff, and watched the sun rise without saying a word. He painted again. Not for clients. Just for me. Watercolor portraits of places I'd never been. He said he wanted me to remember things I never had. Sometimes we danced in the kitchen again. Sometimes we didn't need music, just breath and memory and arms that still knew how to hold. He read to me at night when my eyes got too tired. His voice steady, like the world wasn't falling apart. And sometimes I wrote letters to him. For later. For the days when my body forgets everything, and all that's left is silence. I asked him once, "What will you do when I'm not me?" His jaw tightened. "You'll always be you." "No. I mean when I forget your face. Your voice. When I call you someone else's name. When I look at you like you're a stranger." He leaned forward, kissed my forehead, and whispered something that will stay with me longer than any memory. "Then I'll fall in love with you again. Every day. From the start. That's what love is. Not just the falling. But the staying. The waking up to the same person with a different heart, a different mind, and loving them anyway. The grieving of a goodbye that hasn't fully arrived, but you feel it, inching closer with every heartbeat. In the end, the pain and the love became the same thing. They lived in the same room. Slept in the same bed. Wrote the same story. Eli never left me. Not even as I left myself. And in that space, that impossible, unthinkable, beautiful space, I found something that lives deeper than memory. A love that doesn't need to be remembered to be real. If you're watching this, if you've followed us through every chapter, please remember this. Love is not a fairy tale. It's not always fireworks or perfect moments or destiny. Sometimes it's heartbreak, quiet rage, missed years, and quiet mornings where you hold hands like lifelines. Sometimes it hurts. But God, it's still beautiful. Final line. If I forget the world, let the last thing I remember be the way you looked at me, when I couldn't remember your name.